Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. In this video, we take a look at another hero from Bright Lights, Dash IO. Before we get started, I just wanted to real quick say that this video is being recorded very close to calling Melbourne. This Dash IO list I think is a little easier to play than the one that got second. However, I do think that if you were going to learn Dash.io, this might be a good start, but I think eventually you should probably switch to a list closer to this. Thomas Dowling had an amazing performance and Calling Melbourne getting second. This is a list that there are very few changes I would probably end up making. I heard someone say that Thomas would have swapped these fender benders for, I believe it was red outpace. But I think other than that change, which the two cards are very similar, but other than that change, I think this is a near perfect list for what Dash.io can be currently. I think it's playing around maybe 65 of the best cards you could be playing with some very nice tech decisions that really help it and really let it shine. So again, before we move on to the actual deck list that I'm going to show you, this is probably a better list to eventually switch to. I do think my list though is a little easier to learn. I just wanted to say that real quick because it was so close to that actual event, Calling Melbourne. I'm literally recording this Sunday night, so like less than a day after the event has ended. So with all that said, let's take a look at the equipment. Starting with our main weapon, Symbiosis Shot. Symbiosis Shot is a dash specialization, and it is a two-handed gun with 2 power. Sadly, it is not a pistol, but that might have been too overpowered. When a mechanologist item enters the arena, if Symbiosis Shot has less than 6 counters, it gets a Steam counter. So you're pretty much capped at 6 counters, and for an action, you can remove a counter to attack with it. Dash.io's main strategy revolves around playing multiple items, gaining extra action points, and firing all of the charges on your Symbiosis Shot. For that main headpiece, we have Crown of Providence. Because it's some nice block, Dash starts with only 36 health, so having some added defense is very nice. Tekla Foundry Heart is another 3 health, but of course we're using it for its main effect. Adaptive Plating takes great effect in this deck, since on some turns some of our items will end up going away at the start of our turn anyway, so Adaptive Plating can be an extremely easy 3 block. And finally, Achilles Accelerators. They are AB1 for their AB matchups. We're not on a deck that wants to play something like Mechanoid, so we don't really need the other legs. We can just play these Achilles, have the action points for the games we need it, have the Arcane Barrier for the games we need it. Dash.io herself, I didn't really talk about her at all. I'll just go over her real quick. You can look at the top card of your deck at any time, which is important for her second ability, which lets you play a 0 or 1 cost item from the top of your deck as an instant once per turn, and does cost an additional 1 resource to play. So as an example, if you wanted to play a Boom Grenade off the top, it would cost you 1. She also has 4 intellect and only 36 health, putting her on par with Icelander's health. This is perfectly fine. This is an extremely fast aggro deck that can abuse hit effects of cards such as Boom Grenade to punish the opponent for taking a small amount of damage. Before we go on to the actual deck list itself, we do have 2 equipment in our inventory. Visitronic Model I, just for our bigger arcane matchups, so our wizard, so we can get some added arcane barrier, as well as Goliath Gauntlet for matchups. We don't need for matchups we don't need the adaptive plating block. We just want to push through more damage. Moving on to the main board. This is a 66 card main board. Mechanologists generally will have to boost through a large chunk of their deck, and this deck is no exception. All of your attacks, apart from two, but one of them is generally going to be a pitch, have boost. Starting with the attacks, since they're the easiest to explain. Heist lets you put a item from any banished zone into play if it costs 0 or 1 when it hits, and it is a 2 for 5. Med X Red is a 1 for 4. That when it hits, we can put an item from our hand into play that costs 0 or 1. Pulse Wave Harpoon is Pulse Wave Harpoon. I'm not going to explain it. This card is very, very good. It's also not new. All three of these are at 3, as well as our 3 Twin Drive. It boosts twice. It's mainly here for maximum velocity, so we can play this plus something else and then max velocity. Generally going to be something like pitch a blue to Twin Drive, then play 0 to 60, then heart with our last one to get 2, and then play the max velocity. Speaking of that, 3 max velocity. And then 3 throttle, just for another 2 for 6. Those are all of the red just by themselves attacks. Moving on to the multiple copy attacks. 6 T-Bone, 3 red, 3 blue. Get your opponent to block with their equipment. This is the best 0 cost attack that isn't 0 to 60, which we have all 9 copies of. This is just an incredibly strong card. Either comes in for a breakpoint or is a good pitch of yellow for 3 or blue and 2. As well as we are on all 9 copies of Zipper Hit, because the red and the yellow are breakpoints and the blue is just a good pitch. The last attack in the deck is the Magnetic Shockwave, which forces our opponent to block with X equipment, where X is the number of times we've boosted this combat chain. Pretty good in a lot of matchups. So we can force them to break some of their battle worn and or temper equipment. Looking at the not attacks in the deck, we only play 6 cards or 2 different cards that are not items. High Octane is a 1 cost red action that gives us an action point whenever we boost, as well as draws a card when we play it and has go again itself. This card is obviously here so we can get bonus action points to attack with our gun a bunch of times. This is probably one of the most important cards in the deck. The other one is Spark of Genius, which is a dash specialization. This lets us search our deck for a Mechanologist item of cost X or less. This card costs double X. And if we boosted this turn, we get to draw, letting us set up our arsenal for the next turn. This will mainly be used to find one of 2 cards. Those 2 cards being Penetration Script, which is a 1 cost yellow item with Crank, that when it enters, it gets a steam counter, and at the start of a turn we remove a counter or destroy it. And then our Mechanologist attacks get +1 while it's in play. Really good with all the attacks in our deck. Makes all of them even bigger. Makes our yellow 0s and our red T-Bones breakpoints as well. Sadly, it doesn't pump our gun, but that would be too good. The other item we can get is the Tekla Core, which is a other dash specialization. This enters with 2 steam counters, and at the beginning of our action phase, we remove 1 to gain 2 resources. The last cards in the deck are 9 copies of Boom Grenade. I talked about the Calling Melbourne list prior. A good swap that you could consider making is swapping out the blue Boom Grenades for the blue backup protocols. The reason I swapped to blue Boom Grenades is because they are a little easier to understand since you already have the red and the yellows in your deck. Boom Grenade is a 0 cost item with Crank. It enters with 1 Steam counter, pretty much the same as Penetration Script. And then all of them explode when a Mechanologist attack hits a hero, and it does some amount of damage to them. Red doing 4, yellow doing 3, and blue only doing 2, which is why this one isn't as important to play. You could play, as I said, backup protocol blue, and this wouldn't really be all too missed. Moving on to the inventory, the rest of the inventory. 3 backup protocol red. Even though I'm not on the blue in this list, the red is extremely important for matchups that will be trying to fatigue us. We can use backup protocol red to help set up our twin drive plus X plus max velocity turns, or just get back another attack for an even larger turn with something like a penetration script or a high octane. 1 Convection Amplifier. This is a card in the Calling Melbourne list. This is here sort of for a similar reason. At some point, we will need the Dominate to chip through the end of the game. So this card is an easy tutor off of a Spark of Genius and can even be played off the top with Dash because it costs 0. So at some point, when we set up our combo with our max velocity, we will give the max velocity Dominate, letting it come in for a lot that really can't be blocked. You only need 1 because you shouldn't need to activate this thing more than twice, I would hope. So, good card here. And then finally, 3 Dissolving Shield for matchups that have a lot of breakpoints that we need to prevent some damage for, or a matchup like Kano and Iyslander, who have a lot of arcane damage that we can prevent using the Dissolving Shield. That is going to be it for the video. Not a super long one, but that's really because I think I didn't really do Dash justice. I am not the best Dash.io player. I don't think anyone is. Dash.io is an extremely hard deck to play. The highest levels, if you really know your deck, you can definitely perform. And I mean, we did see that this weekend. But, of course, I am just a silly little Iyslander player. I don't play these. I don't get to look at the top card of my deck. I don't play Kano. I only see what's in my hand and what's in my arsenal. So, but I do think that this is a pretty good list for anyone just starting out with Dash.io. Has some of the Calling Melbourne tech that I think definitely let it shine, but still has some of the more basic mech cards that are pretty much just the staples. Next week, hopefully, I find a Teclovessn build that I think is good. I am working on a newer list right now, one that is a bit more aggressive than the slower Teclovessn list that you may have already seen. I definitely do need to get some games in with it, though. If that list doesn't really work out, a slower list will be the one that I show you. Maybe even both, but that might be an extremely long video. So with that all said, I hope you all had a good day, or will have a good day, depending on how early you are watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.